AITA for hiding my salary because my parents are taking all my paycheck. So, this whole situation started on my 16th birthday, and, honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget it. In our family, there's this unspoken rule that the day you hit 16, you start working. I always knew it was coming. My parents had been hinting at it forever. My older sister, who's 21 now, had to start working when she was 16, same with my brother, who's 19. They both had part-time jobs through high school, and it was just one of those normal things in our house. So, I wasn't totally against the idea of getting a job. If anything, I'd been looking forward to it, at least for the freedom part. I mean, I'd finally have my own money to spend however I wanted, right? Well, that was the plan, until my parents decided to welcome me into the family workforce in a way I never saw coming. It was a couple of days after my birthday, and I'd just gotten hired at this little retail store. Nothing fancy, but it was close by, and it was hiring, so I thought, why not? I was pumped. First job, first paycheck. It was a big deal for me. I'd already started planning what I was going to do with the money. There was this game I'd been dying to get, plus maybe some clothes, and I figured I could even save up a bit, so yeah, I was excited. After my first couple of shifts, I finally got my first paycheck. It wasn't huge, but it felt incredible to see money with my name on it. I came home, all excited to tell my parents about it, but before I could even sit down, my mom and dad sat me down for this talk. They looked super serious, and I was a little thrown off, but I thought maybe they were just going to congratulate me or something. Instead, my dad starts telling me how, in our family, we believe in sharing the load. He says that since they'd spent so much time raising us and giving us everything we needed, it was only fair that we give back. That's when he dropped the bomb. They were going to take a portion of my paycheck every month. I was stunned. I mean, who does that? At first, I thought they were joking, but nope. My mom backed him up, saying it was what they did with my sister and brother when they started working. And okay, I kind of understood that, I guess. But then they told me exactly how much they were taking. It wasn't just a little bit for rent or bills. They wanted 70% of my paycheck. 70%. I could barely believe it. I was trying to wrap my head around it. Like, was I really going to be left with only 30% of what I worked for? My parents noticed the look on my face and started explaining that, because I was the youngest, I'd always gotten the most attention. They even said they'd spent more money on me because of it, so it was only fair that I paid them back more than my siblings had too. Apparently, being the youngest meant I owed them extra. I didn't argue. I didn't even know how to argue at that point. I just felt numb. I handed over the 70% and tried to convince myself it was just a one-time thing. I mean, maybe they were just doing this to teach me some kind of lesson, right? Maybe the next paycheck would be mine, and I could actually use it for myself. So, a couple of weeks went by, and I kept working, hoping that things would be different the next time. But nope. My second paycheck comes around, and, just like before, my parents took 70% of it. This time, I wasn't as willing to let it slide. I told them I didn't think it was fair that I should get to keep more of my own money since, you know, I'm the one who earned it. My dad gave me this stern look and basically told me that if I didn't like it, they'd take 80% next time. I was floored. I honestly didn't even know what to say to that. At this point, I was feeling pretty defeated. I kept going to work, because what choice did I have? But every paycheck, it was the same story. I'd get a small slice of what I earned, and they'd pocket the rest. I tried to bring it up a couple more times, and every time, they'd either guilt-trip me about how much they'd done for me or throw out that 80% threat. My sister and brother were sympathetic, but they weren't exactly helpful. My sister just said, yeah, that's how they are, and my brother joked about how he'd just learned to live with it. But here's the kicker. I found out that they hadn't taken nearly as much from my siblings. Apparently, when my sister started working, they'd only taken 50% from her, and with my brother, it was even less because he was really into sports, and they wanted him to save up for college. So, somehow, I'm the only one getting this extreme tax just because I'm the youngest. I tried talking to my parents about it one more time. I told them straight up that it didn't seem fair, that they were taking way more from me than they did from my siblings. My dad just shrugged and said, life's not fair, and that I should be grateful they were teaching me responsibility. He went on about how I'd thank them someday, how I'd appreciate learning the value of money and what it means to contribute to a household. But honestly, it doesn't feel like they're teaching me responsibility. It feels like they're just taking advantage of me because they know I can't say no. I keep working, and I keep handing over most of what I earn, and it's just this endless cycle. I don't even feel like the money is mine anymore. Every time I clock in at work, I'm basically working for my parents, not myself. And that's the worst part, knowing that no matter how hard I work, most of it will just go straight into their pockets. I've thought about quitting my job just to see what they'd do, but then they'd probably give me a whole lecture about how I'm lazy and ungrateful. Or worse, they'd make me do more chores around the house to earn my keep. Every time I get paid, it's a reminder that, in my own family, my hard work isn't really mine. Update 1. The longer this went on, the harder it got to keep my frustration hidden. My parents seemed completely unfazed by my reactions, no matter how much I tried to explain how unfair this felt, and things just got worse. After months of taking 70% of my paycheck, my parents dropped yet another bombshell on me. They pulled me aside one evening, wearing the same "this is for your own good" expressions they always wore when they were about to lay down the law. This time, they told me that since I'd always gotten the most attention as the youngest, it was their responsibility to make sure I was extra prepared for adulthood. According to them, I needed to learn how to get by on as little as possible so I could be more responsible and better with money. So, for the next 3 months, they decided I'd only be keeping 10% of my paycheck. That's right, 10%. They'd take 90% of what I earned, and I'd be left with just a fraction. And they told me this as if it was the most reasonable, normal thing in the world. At first, I thought I'd misheard them. This whole 70% thing was already ridiculous, but 90%. I couldn't believe it. I tried to stay calm, even though I could feel myself shaking with anger. I told them that I didn't think it was fair, especially since they never did anything like this with my brother or sister. But of course, they just brushed it off like it didn't matter. They repeated the same stuff about me getting more attention and how they were doing this to make me more responsible. And then, in that same calm, patronizing tone, they said that if I didn't like it, they'd just take the whole paycheck instead. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. The whole paycheck, they were really holding that over my head. It was like nothing I did was ever going to be enough for them, and no matter how hard I tried to get them to understand, they'd just double down on their rules. I had no way to argue back without making things worse for myself. So, once again, I just swallowed my pride and tried to mentally prepare for another round of this madness. The next payday rolled around, and I could feel my anxiety building. Every shift, I was pushing myself to work harder, knowing that I'd only get a tiny slice of whatever I earned. The closer I got to payday, the angrier I felt. All I could think about was how unfair this was, how they were robbing me of my hard-earned money and then acting like it was some kind of life lesson. And this time, it wasn't just 70%. It was almost everything. I barely had enough to cover basic things I wanted or needed. When payday finally came, I felt this surge of resentment. I'd been working my butt off, dealing with all the stress of a job and school, and now I was going to have to hand over 90% of it to my parents. It just felt wrong on every level. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided I wasn't going to give it to them. I knew they'd be furious, but I didn't care. I was done with playing along. When my parents came to collect their share, I told them I'd lost my job. I lied straight to their faces and said that my manager had let me go because business was slow, and they needed to cut hours. I made up this whole story, hoping they'd just accept it and leave me alone. I told them I was looking for another job and that I'd let them know when I started earning money again. For the first time in months, I actually felt like I had some control. My paycheck was still in my wallet, hidden away where they couldn't find it, and for once, I could actually keep what I'd earned. At first, they seemed shocked, maybe even a little annoyed, but they didn't press me about it. I figured I'd bought myself at least a little time. But as the days passed, I started getting more and more paranoid. What if they decided to go to my work and ask about me? They'd done that kind of thing before, like when my brother was skipping school and they showed up at his principal's office to check in. The thought of them finding out terrified me. I didn't know how they'd react if they found out I'd lied, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be pretty. For a while, I kept my head down and pretended like everything was normal. I'd go to work, come home, and avoid talking about money as much as possible. I made sure to keep my paychecks hidden, even though I know it was only a matter of time before they started questioning things. Every time they looked at me, I could feel my stomach twist with anxiety, wondering if they suspected something. Now, I'm constantly thinking about what to do next. Part of me wants to just tell them the truth, but I know that'll only make things worse. They'd probably go right back to taking everything, and I'd be left with nothing. And then there's the fear that if they do show up at my work, I'll be humiliated. I don't want my manager or coworkers to see my parents making a scene, demanding to know about my hours or my paycheck. I feel trapped. I know this can't go on forever, but I have no idea how to break free from it without everything blowing up in my face. Right now, I'm just trying to make it through each day without them finding out, hoping that maybe, somehow, I can get them to ease up. But deep down, I know that as long as they think they own my paycheck, I'll never really be free. Update 2. Then one evening my parents called me to their kitchen. When my parents took me aside, I thought it was just going to be another lecture. I'd gotten used to them scolding me, telling me how I wasn't working hard enough, or reminding me of how much they'd done for me. But this time, I could tell something was different. They had this cold, calculated look, and I could feel this wave of dread wash over me as soon as they told me they'd been to my work. They'd actually gone there. They'd confronted my manager, asked around, and found out that I'd lied about losing my job. They knew I'd been hiding my paycheck. I don't think I've ever felt more trapped. My mind was racing, trying to think of some excuse, some way out, but it was too late. They told me that because I'd lied to them, they were no longer going to take just a portion of my paycheck. They said that for the next 3 months, every single dollar I earned would go to them. No 70%, number 90% they wanted it all. I was shocked. I'd barely been managing with the little they'd been leaving me, but now they wanted everything. I couldn't believe it. They acted like this was a natural consequence of my actions, like it was something I should have seen coming. I felt my heart sink. All I could think was how hard it was going to be to work those long hours, knowing that every cent I earned would go straight into their pockets. I wasn't even going to see a dollar of my own money, and they didn't care. In their minds, this was my punishment, my lesson in life. I tried to explain how difficult it was to juggle school and work already. I told them that it wasn't fair, that the tiny amount I'd been keeping for myself was hardly enough to make it worth it in the first place. But they brushed me off, acting like I was being ungrateful. They told me I should be thankful that they were creating these obstacles for me, because it was supposed to toughen me up. In their eyes, they were doing me a favor by making things harder, as if I'd look back on this one day and be grateful for it. But all I felt was anger and helplessness. I was working so hard, trying to keep up with everything, and they were stripping away every reason I had to keep going. When payday came around, I felt sick. I knew what was coming. I could barely look at them as they asked for my entire paycheck, but I mustered up enough courage to tell them I couldn't do it. I asked if they could at least leave me with a small part of it, something I could call my own after all the hours I'd put in. But they weren't having it. They insisted that they were entitled to everything I earned. They said that if I wanted to make things easier for myself, I'd have to stop causing trouble and just hand it over. And then, without even giving me a chance to respond, they grabbed my wallet and took the money themselves. I was stunned. I just stood there, feeling completely defeated as they emptied it out, not even leaving me with a single dollar. It was like my hard work didn't matter at all, like everything I'd been doing was just a means for them to take what they wanted. I felt powerless, watching them take the money I'd worked so hard for, knowing that they didn't see it as mine at all. After that, something in me broke. I went to work and did my shifts like usual, but I felt empty. There was no motivation, no pride in earning my own money, because I knew it wasn't really mine. It was like I was working for them, like I was their employee instead of their kid. And every time payday rolled around, I felt this weight settle on my shoulders, knowing they'd take everything again. I didn't have any say in it. They'd decided, and I was just supposed to go along with it, no questions asked. In school, I was barely keeping up, my grades were slipping, and I didn't have the energy to care. Between work and dealing with my parents, I felt like I was being stretched so thin that I was going to snap. I'd come home exhausted, only to be reminded that all my efforts were for nothing, that every ounce of energy I put into my job was just another dollar for them to take. They'd stripped away any sense of independence I had, and they acted like it was for my own good. They'd talk about how proud they were, how they were teaching me to be an adult, but all I felt was resentment. Now, I'm just biding my time, counting down the days until I can finally leave. I know it's a long way off, but it's the only thing that keeps me going. The idea of breaking free from them, of finally having something that's mine, is the only hope I have left. Until then, I'll keep working, keep handing over my paycheck, and keep pretending that it doesn't bother me. But deep down, I know I'll never forgive them for this. They might think they're teaching me a lesson, but all they're really doing is pushing me further away. Update 3. After months of living paycheck to paycheck with my parents snatching every dollar I earned, I felt like I can't cope. I couldn't keep going like this, working hard at school and at my job only to have nothing left for myself. The constant pressure, the endless hours, and the lack of any reward were breaking me down. I needed a way out, something that would let me keep a little bit of my own money without them finding out, so I decided to get a second job. It felt risky, knowing how relentless my parents were about tracking every penny I made, but I couldn't shake the thought of having something that was truly mine. I found a part-time position that fit around my schedule, something they'd never even think to look for. It was just a few shifts a week, not enough to exhaust me, but enough to bring in some extra cash that I could keep hidden away. Finally, I had something for myself. The feeling of cashing that first paycheck and not having to hand it over to them was like a breath of fresh air. I tucked it away, feeling a sense of pride and independence I hadn't felt in months. For the first month, I managed to keep it up without them noticing. I'd give them every cent from my primary job, keeping up appearances, and then quietly deposit my earnings from the second job into a hidden account. It was like I'd found a small pocket of freedom, a little light at the end of the tunnel. I started making plans, thinking about what I could do with the money once I'd saved enough, maybe buy a few things for myself, or even stash some away for when I finally left home. It gave me something to look forward to, a tiny spark of hope that kept me going through the grind of school and work. But, like everything else in my life, it wasn't long before my parents caught wind of it. They had always been watchful, but I didn't expect them to actually go to my workplace, yet again. Apparently, they had gone to my manager to check on my performance, and somehow they had found out about my second job. My heart sank when they confronted me about it. They looked furious, as if I'd broken some unspoken rule, like my decision to work a second job was an act of rebellion. And, just like before, they made it all about them. They said that because I'd gotten this second job without their permission, I now owed them the wages from both jobs. I was stunned. After everything they'd taken from me already, after all the work I'd done, now they wanted my second paycheck too. I'd worked those shifts on my own time, and they had no right to it, but they didn't see it that way. They insisted that I hand over every dollar I'd earned, claiming that I'd undermined their rules by working a second job in secret. According to them, I was lucky they weren't making me hand over everything I'd already earned there as some kind of penalty. The twisted logic left me speechless. And it didn't end there. They demanded that I quit my second job immediately. They didn't want me overworking myself or letting my grades slip any further because of unnecessary distractions. I couldn't believe it. My grades were suffering because of the stress they'd put me under in the first place, the constant pressure to work harder and harder just to have my earnings snatched away. And now they were acting like they were doing me a favor by forcing me to quit the only thing that was giving me even a hint of freedom. I felt trapped in a way I hadn't felt before, like there was no way out. I'd taken a risk to make a little bit of money for myself, and now even that was being taken from me. So, after days of arguments, feeling like I had no choice, I finally gave in. I quit my second job and handed over my final paycheck from it, feeling defeated. Watching them take that money felt like a piece of my independence had been ripped away. They had no problem taking everything from me, yet they continued to talk about preparing me for adulthood and teaching me responsibility, as if draining me dry was somehow a lesson in responsibility. Every time I went to work after that, it felt pointless. My job wasn't mine anymore, it was theirs. I felt like I was going through the motions, just a cog in the machine, doing what I was supposed to do but with no hope of keeping even a fraction of what I earned. The only thing that kept me going was the thought of someday getting out of this. I kept my head down, did my shifts, and gave them every penny they demanded, but I knew that I couldn't do this forever. They might think they're teaching me to be responsible, but all they're doing is pushing me to a breaking point. AITA for not listening to my parents and hiding my salary, and now they will take my entire salary.